The rain had been falling since dawn, washing over the cobblestones of downtown Savannah. Most people hurried past the courthouse that morning, umbrellas tilted, low eyes fixed on the ground. But one small figure stood motionless in front of a glass law office, soaked, shivering, and clutching a paper bag. "Sir," the little girl called out as a man in a gray suit passed by. Her voice was soft but steady, cutting through the sound of rain. "Please, can you help my mom?" She opened the bag and held out a single banana. "It's all I have." If that moment doesn't already tug at your heart, stay with me, because what happens next will turn a simple plea into a life-changing revelation. Drop a comment if you believe fate sometimes brings people together in the most unexpected ways, because this story will test that belief. Ethan Walker had no idea why his steps froze. He'd been rushing to court files in one hand, coffee in the other. But something about the girl's eyes, gray-green and glistening with rain, pulled him back. "What did you say?" he asked, lowering his umbrella. The girl nodded, her lips trembling. "My name's Maya. My mom's in jail. They said she stole something, but she didn't. I walked here to find a lawyer." Ethan blinked, stunned. The police station was 6 miles away. "You walked alone." She nodded again. "I thought if I found a good man, he'd help her." Inside the law office, the lights glowed warm against the storm. Ethan's assistant watched through the glass as he knelt beside the girl. "You're soaked," he said gently. "Where's your dad?" Maya hesitated. "I never had one." The words hit him harder than he expected. Something in his chest tightened an ache he couldn't name. He led her inside, offered her a towel, and called for hot chocolate. She held the cup with both hands, still watching him with that searching gaze. "You're really a lawyer?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said with a faint smile. "And you came here to hire me?" She nodded. "But I don't have money. I brought this instead." She placed the banana on his desk, its peel bruised but intact. Ethan stared at it for a long moment, unable to laugh, unable to speak. He was known in Savannah as a calm, collected attorney, a man who built his firm from scratch after a near-fatal car accident years ago. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive, though a piece of his memory never returned. Sometimes he dreamed of a woman's voice calling his name, but the face was always blurred, lost in fog. Now, watching the little girl before him, he felt that same strange pull from those dreams, a whisper of something half-remembered. "Tell me your mom's name," he said, quietly. "Elena Collins," Maya answered. "She works at the jewelry store on Whitaker Street." Ethan froze again. That name, it flickered inside him like a match in the dark. He didn't know why it sounded familiar, only that it did. Maya's story spilled out between sips of cocoa, her mom accused of stealing a necklace. Her pleas ignored her aunt, too scared to help. "She always says stealing's wrong," the girl whispered. "She told me, truth always wins." Ethan listened in silence, heart twisting with something deeper than pity. "And you walked all the way here alone?" he asked again. "I wanted to be brave like her," Maya said. "If I could find a lawyer, maybe she could come home." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he rose, took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "You found one," he said simply. "We'll start today." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. "Really?" He smiled. "Really. But first we're getting you some food." As they stepped out into the drizzle again, the town seemed to hush around them. A man and a child, walking side by side, two strangers bound by something neither of them yet understood. Ethan didn't know that within a few days, the case would unravel secrets buried for years, secrets that would turn his entire life upside down. He glanced down at Maya as she skipped beside him, still clutching the banana. "Do you trust me?" he asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "You have kind eyes." He chuckled softly, though the sound faltered in his throat. Kind eyes. Someone else had said that to him once, long ago before the accident, before the memories disappeared. When they reached the diner across the street, he guided her to a booth and ordered pancakes. She wolfed them down, smiling shyly when syrup dripped onto her sleeve. "My mom makes pancakes just like this," she said, licking her fingers. Ethan smiled faintly. "Then we'll bring her some too." But as he spoke, a strange heaviness pressed against his chest. Elena Collins. That name wouldn't leave him. It lingered, tugging at the corners of his mind like a melody he couldn't place. He tried to shake it off, focusing instead on the child's bright chatter. Yet every word she spoke, her laughter, her tone, felt like echoes from another time. When he dropped Maya off at her aunt's small house that evening, the storm had cleared. She waved from the porch, clutching the paper bag that now held a wrapped pancake instead of a banana. "You'll really help my mom?" she asked one last time. Ethan met her gaze. "I promise." As he drove away, the setting sun streaked the wet streets gold. For the first time in years, Ethan's heart felt alive and terrified. He didn't yet know that the woman sitting in a cold jail cell across town wasn't just another client. She was the missing piece of the life he'd forgotten. And the little girl who had handed him that banana wasn't just asking for justice. She was asking her father to come home. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Ethan Walker's office, painting golden stripes across the stack of case files on his desk. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Maya's small hands holding that bruised banana and heard her trembling voice. "Please help my mom." It wasn't just sympathy that kept him awake. It was something deeper, something he couldn't name. By 8 o'clock, he was already standing inside the county detention center. The sound of metal doors slamming echoed down the hallway as a guard led him to a small interview room. A few minutes later, the door opened and a woman was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her wrists were cuffed, her dark hair tied back loosely. When she looked up, Ethan froze. For a moment, neither spoke. Her eyes, warm brown, flecked with gold, met his, and something inside him shifted. It was like being hit with a memory he couldn't quite grasp. "I'm Ethan Walker," he said, finally clearing his throat. "I'm the attorney your daughter asked for." Elena Collins blinked in surprise. "Maya found you." Her voice trembled. "She actually made it to town, she did," Ethan said softly. "She's safe. She told me what happened. I'd like to help you, Miss Collins." Elena sank into the chair, her shoulders trembling as she exhaled in relief. "Thank God she's okay," she whispered. Then, gathering herself, she looked at him cautiously. "But why would you help me? You don't even know me." Ethan hesitated, feeling that strange tug again. "Let's just say, I believe you deserve someone on your side." He opened his notepad. "Tell me everything from the start." Elena explained that she had worked as a floor supervisor at Lawson & Coder Jewelers for 5 years. The day before her arrest, the owner, Andrew Lawson, claimed an $8,000 diamond bracelet went missing during a private showing. The only person present at the time was his frequent visitor, a woman named Marissa Quinn, rumored to be his mistress. "She came in early that morning," Elena said quietly. "The store cameras were on, but the footage they showed the police only starts after she left. Then suddenly, I'm accused of stealing it." Ethan frowned, jotting notes. "They deleted part of the footage." Elena nodded. "I think so. Andrew wouldn't let anyone else review the files. He told the police he trusted his own recording. Next thing I knew, they were putting me in handcuffs." Ethan leaned back, studying her. Everything about her composure, the way she spoke, the quiet pain in her voice felt painfully familiar. He shook the thought off. Do you have any witnesses who can confirm she was there that morning? One of the delivery guys saw her leave, but he told me he's afraid of losing his job if he talks. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then I'll talk to him. For the next 2 hours, he went over every detail, every timeline, every inconsistency. By the time he left, he already had a strategy forming in his mind. Outside the station, he paused to call his assistant Megan. I need you to find all public cameras near Lawson and Cobra traffic storefronts, anything that might have captured someone entering or leaving around 9 a.m. the day of the theft. Also, dig into Andrew Lawson and Marissa Quinn credit reports, business filings, social media, discreetly. By lunchtime, Ethan was standing outside the jewelry store. Through the glass window, polished diamonds gleamed under perfect lighting, each one worth more than most people made in a month. He walked in, greeted by the faint smell of cologne and tension. Andrew Lawson, a heavy-set man in his 50s with slicked-back hair, stepped forward with a forced smile. Mr. Walker, what can I do for you? Ethan extended his card. I'm representing Elena Collins. The man's smile faded instantly. She's a thief counselor. I'd advise you to choose your clients more carefully. Ethan didn't flinch. You said the footage showed her alone that morning. It does. Then you won't mind if I ask the police to run a digital audit. If anything's missing, they'll trace who accessed the system. Lawson's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me of something? I'm simply ensuring my client gets a fair defense, Ethan said evenly. Oh, and one more thing, if Ms. Quinn happens to stop by, tell her I'd love to ask a few questions about her previous shoplifting record. The man's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Ethan smirked. Try me. When he stepped out into the sun, he could already feel the tide turning. That evening, Megan called. You were right. One of the boutiques across the street caught Marissa Quinn entering Lawson & Co. at 8:05 a.m. and leaving with a paper bag at 9:10. The store didn't open until 9. Ethan smiled faintly. That's all I needed. The next morning, he returned to the courthouse and filed a motion to suppress the current evidence and request bail. When the hearing ended, Elena walked free, trembling, as she stepped outside the building. Maya was waiting at the bottom of the steps, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. Mom, she cried, running into her arms. Ethan stood a few feet away, watching the reunion in silence. There was something indescribably beautiful about the way Elena knelt down, tears streaming as she hugged her daughter. Then she looked up, eyes meeting Ethan's. Thank you, she whispered. You don't owe me thanks, he said quietly. You owe it to your daughter. She's the bravest kid I've ever met. Elena smiled faintly, still holding Maya close. She's her father's daughter, she murmured without realizing she'd spoken aloud. Ethan tilted his head. What was that? She blinked, startled. Nothing. Just, thank you again, Mr. Walker. He nodded, but couldn't shake the feeling that her words meant more than she intended. As they walked away, hand in hand, he found himself watching the two of them longer than he should have. There was something about the curve of her smile, the way she brushed Maya's hair from her face. It stirred something buried deep within him. When he returned to his office, the new footage sat waiting on his laptop. The image was grainy, but clear enough Marissa Quinn slipping a velvet box into her purse while Lawson looked away. Ethan leaned back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The case was far from over, but the truth was finally surfacing. Still beneath the satisfaction, something else gnawed at him, a quiet, persistent voice asking the question he didn't dare speak aloud. Why did Elena Collins's name feel like a door he'd once walked through and forgotten how to find again? 3 days after the hearing, Ethan Walker drove through the quiet streets of Savannah with a white envelope on the passenger seat beside him. Inside were Elena Collins's back wages and an official apology from Andrew Lawson, the man who had tried to ruin her life. Ethan could have mailed it, but he didn't. He wanted to see her face when she learned the nightmare was finally over. When he reached the small blue house near the river, sunlight was spilling through the trees. Elena was outside watering a row of potted daisies, her sleeves rolled up, her hair tied loosely. She looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for someone who had just been through hell. "Good morning," he greeted as he stepped out of his car. She turned startled for a second before softening into a polite smile. "Mr. Walker," she said, "you didn't have to come all this way." "I wanted to," Ethan replied, holding out the envelope. "Your back pay." And Lawson posted a public apology. "The charges have been officially dropped." She froze, the hose slipping from her hand. "You're serious? Check his company website if you don't believe me," Ethan said with a small grin. "I even made him cover your bail." Her eyes welled up. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Just promise me you'll rest." She hesitated before taking the envelope. "You've done more than I could have hoped for," she said softly. "You didn't have to get involved like that." "I did what any decent lawyer would do," he answered. Then, after a pause, he added, "And maybe a little more." They stood in silence for a moment, the sound of cicadas humming through the warm air. Ethan glanced toward the front steps, noticing a pair of small sneakers, Maya's. "Is she home? She's at school?" Elena said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "She's been talking about you nonstop." He chuckled. "She's one of a kind." When she smiled, something flickered in him again, like light passing through fog. A memory brushed the edges of his mind, a woman laughing beside a pier, her hair blowing across her face. He tried to hold on to it, but it slipped away like water through his fingers. "Elena," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated. "Have we met before?" Her expression changed. The color drained slightly from her face, and for a heartbeat she couldn't speak. "Why do you ask?" she finally said. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "Ever since I met you, I've had these flashes like pieces of a puzzle I can't fit together. I had an accident 7 years ago. I lost 3 years of my memory. Sometimes I dream about a woman. I can never see her face, but her voice, it feels like home. And when I hear yours, He stopped, embarrassed by how exposed he suddenly felt. Elena looked down, her hands trembling slightly as she held the envelope. "You should go, Mr. Walker. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said quickly. "No," she whispered. "It's not that." He stepped closer. "Then what is it?" She took a deep breath and looked at him, her eyes shimmering with tears she could no longer hold back. "You really don't remember, do you?" Ethan's heart skipped. Remember what she swallowed hard. "You and we weren't strangers. You were the man I planned to marry." For a moment, everything went still. The street noise faded, the air heavy and still around them. Ethan could only stare at her. "That's not possible." "It is," she said, her voice breaking. 7 years ago, you promised we'd build a life together. You said you'd be gone for just a week to visit your parents in Seattle. Then you vanished. I thought you'd left me." Ethan's mouth went dry. The world tilted slightly as fragments began to flash, her laughter, the smell of the sea, a ring made from a straw. "Elena." His voice cracked. I remember something. A restaurant by the water, candles, your hand in mine." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I searched for you. I even went to Seattle, but no one could tell me where you were. I didn't know you were in an accident." He felt his knees weaken. Oh, God. His hand covered his mouth as realization hit him like a wave. "You're the woman from my dreams." She nodded slowly. "And Maya, she's our daughter." The words hung in the air, fragile and earth-shattering. Ethan took a step back, his pulse roaring in his ears. "Our daughter. She was born 2 months after you disappeared," Elena whispered. "I never told her who her father was. How could I? I thought you'd chosen to forget us." Ethan felt his chest tighten until he could barely breathe. "Elena, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. I believe you," she said through tears. "But that doesn't erase the years we lost." He closed the distance between them, his voice trembling. "Let me make it right. Let me be there for her, for both of you." Her gaze softened, but pain lingered in it. "You can be in her life. She deserves that. But we can't just pick up where we left off." He nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I understand." Maya's laughter suddenly rang out from down the street, her school bus pulling up earlier than expected. She ran toward them, her backpack bouncing, her face lit with joy. "Mr. Walker," she shouted. Ethan forced a smile, wiping his face quickly before she reached him. "Hey, champ," he said, kneeling down. She threw her arms around his neck. "Mom says you're our hero." He swallowed hard, glancing up at Elena, whose eyes were shining. "I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago," he whispered. That evening, after he left, Elena stood at the porch watching the sky fade from gold to violet. She held the envelope against her chest, the weight of the past finally breaking through her composure. She had thought closure meant forgetting, but seeing Ethan again had taught her something else. Sometimes fate doesn't want you to move on. It wants you to remember. Ethan Walker spent the next few days trying to focus on his work, but every time he looked down at his desk, his thoughts drifted back to Elena and the little girl who had unknowingly changed his life. He told himself he needed space to think, to breathe, but the truth was he missed them already. Every sound reminded him of that moment outside her house when she whispered, "She's our daughter." Those words played over and over in his mind until he could hardly sleep. When Vanessa Brooks, his girlfriend from Seattle, called that week, he hesitated before answering. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently. "Is everything okay?" Ethan looked at the reflection in his office window, the tired man staring back at him. "Not really," he admitted. "There's something I need to tell you." That evening, they met at a small cafe downtown. Vanessa listened as he told her everything from Maya's desperate plea to the truth about Elena. Her expression didn't change until he said, "She's my daughter, Vanessa." The silence stretched between them before she finally nodded. "I always knew a part of you was still searching for something," she said softly. "Now I understand what it was." She reached across the table, her hand resting on his. "Go be the father she deserves." Her voice trembled, but her smile held steady. "You don't need to apologize for finding the family you lost." Ethan's throat tightened. "You're an incredible woman," he said. "And I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't," Vanessa whispered. "Sometimes life just brings people back to where they belong." That night, as Ethan drove through the quiet streets of Savannah, he realized how true her words were. He had spent years building his career, trying to fill a hole in his life he couldn't explain. Now, he finally knew what had been missing. The next morning, he stopped by Elena's house not as a lawyer, but as a man ready to take responsibility for what he'd lost. Maya spotted him first, racing from the porch to throw her arms around his waist. "You came back?" she squealed. "Of course I did," he said, smiling as he ruffled her hair. "I told you I would." Elena appeared in the doorway, her expression cautious. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," Ethan replied. "I wanted to see how you both were doing and maybe make up for some lost time." That afternoon he took them to Forsyth Park. Maya ran across the grass, chasing Bubbles, her laughter echoing through the trees. Elena sat on a bench nearby, and Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "She has your smile." Elena's eyes softened. "She has your stubbornness," she replied. They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed. But when the laughter faded, reality settled between them again. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I'm glad you're here, but this can't be easy for either of us. I don't know how to just start over." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for that. Not yet. I just want to be in her life. And yours, if you'll let me." Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular presence in their world. He walked Maya to school in the mornings, sat beside her at the kitchen table, as she colored and listened to her chatter about friends and homework. On weekends, he took her to the farmer's market or the library, learning every detail about the daughter he never knew he had. Elena watched it all, quietly, torn between gratitude and fear. Every time she saw Ethan kneel beside Maya to tie her shoes or brush the crumbs from her cheeks, her heart swelled and then tightened again. It was so easy to fall back into what they once had, but she couldn't forget the years of loneliness. The nights she'd cried herself to sleep thinking he'd left for good. One Saturday evening, Ethan invited them both to his house for dinner. He cooked badly, burning half the chicken, but Maya loved it anyway. When she ran off to play, Elena lingered at the table. "You've changed," she said, smiling faintly. "I had to," he admitted. "Losing you taught me that life doesn't wait for second chances, but somehow I got one." Later, they sat on the porch as fireflies flickered through the yard. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "when I woke up after the accident, I didn't remember your name, but I remembered how it felt to love you. That never went away." Elena turned toward him, eyes glistening. "You can't say things like that," she whispered. "It makes it harder to keep my distance." He reached for her hand, not forcing, just holding. "Maybe it's time we stopped keeping our distance." The air between them hung heavy, full of everything they hadn't said. Elena's breath caught, and for the first time in years she didn't pull away. "Let's take it slow," she murmured. "We owe it to Maya not to rush." "I'll wait," Ethan promised, "for as long as it takes." The following week they visited the old university campus where they'd first met. The memories came flooding back the bench, the laughter, the future they'd once planned. When they passed the chapel steps, Ethan stopped, suddenly pressing a hand to his temple. For a moment, Elena thought he was in pain, but then his eyes widened in shock. "I remember," he said hoarsely. "This is where I proposed. You were crying because your mom was sick, and I told you we'd get through it together." Elena's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Ethan turned toward her, tears in his own eyes. "I meant every word he said, and I still do." That night, as they drove home in silence, the past no longer felt like a wound, it felt like a bridge. Redemption wasn't just about righting old wrongs, it was about choosing to love again despite the scars. And for the first time in 7 years, Ethan Walker felt whole. 2 years later, the church bells of Charleston rang softly beneath a sky brushed with pale gold. Inside, sunlight poured through tall stained glass windows, scattering colors across the pews. Elena Collins stood near the altar, her hands trembling slightly as she held a bouquet of white lilies. Across from her, Ethan Walker waited, his expression steady but full of wonder. Between them, little Maya grinned proudly, holding the wedding bands on a velvet cushion. The ceremony was small, just close friends, and a few of Ethan's family from Seattle, but the air felt sacred. It wasn't a grand affair yet, every person present could feel the weight of redemption in that room. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the sound of applause mingled with laughter and tears. Ethan pulled Elena close, whispering, "This time, I'm never letting go." Their journey back to each other hadn't been perfect. It took months of rebuilding trust and rediscovering the rhythm they once had. Elena had hesitated to open her heart again, afraid of losing everything twice. But Ethan had shown up every day in the small ways that mattered. He made breakfast for Maya before school. He fixed the leaky faucet in their kitchen. He left notes on Elena's mirror that said, "You're still my best decision." Slowly, her guard fell, replaced by the quiet certainty that he meant every word. After the wedding, they moved into a restored house near the waterfront. It wasn't the grand home Ethan once dreamed of, but it had character squeaky floors, a creaky porch swing, and the scent of salt in the air. On weekends, they painted walls together while Maya turned cardboard boxes into castles. At night, the three of them would sit outside with mugs of cocoa, watching the stars scatter above the harbor. Ethan's parents, Richard and Caroline, visited often. His mother wept the first time she met Maya, holding her close as if she were making up for all the years they'd lost. "You look just like your father did when he was little," she said with a watery smile. Maya grinned. "Does that mean I'm stubborn too?" Everyone laughed, and for once the past no longer hurt. It simply belonged. 6 months after the wedding, Elena found out she was pregnant. The news came quietly one Sunday morning as sunlight poured into their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed holding the test in her shaking hands. Ethan woke to see her crying softly and rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" he asked, panic in his voice. She looked up, eyes shining. "We're having a baby." He froze, then let out a breath that turned into laughter. He pulled her into his arms, whispering against her hair, another chance to do it right from the beginning. When they told Maya, she squealed so loudly the neighbor's dog barked. "A baby brother?" she asked. "We'll see," Elena said, smiling through happy tears. Months later, as autumn rolled in, their son was born, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and gray-green eyes that mirrored both his parents. They named him Logan Walker. Ethan held him that first night, watching the baby's chest rise and fall. "You have no idea how long I waited for this," he whispered. Elena, exhausted but glowing, smiled faintly. "Maybe you did. Maybe you needed to lose yourself to find us again." Life settled into a new kind of beautiful chaos. Maya learned to hold her baby brother, always singing to him off-key. Ethan balanced late-night feedings with court cases, and somehow even the exhaustion felt sacred. Some evenings, when the children were asleep, he and Elena would dance barefoot in the living room to old songs playing from a scratchy speaker. They didn't talk much during those moments. They didn't need to. Their silence was full of everything they'd been through. A year later, on the anniversary of their wedding, Ethan took Elena and the kids back to the park in Savannah where they first met. The rain had long faded from memory, but the spot still carried its echo, the place where a frightened little girl once stood offering a banana to a stranger. They spread out a blanket under the same oak tree and shared sandwiches while Logan toddled in the grass. As the sun dipped low, Ethan turned to Elena, his hand finding hers. "You know," he said, "if Maya hadn't found me that day, I might never have remembered." Elena smiled softly. "Maybe you would have. Some stories are too strong to stay forgotten." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "You and Maya saved me. Both of you." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "No," she said, "you saved yourself. We just reminded you where home was." The breeze carried the laughter of their children through the park, and for a brief second time seemed to stand still. Ethan closed his eyes, grateful for every scar, every loss, every step that had led him back to this moment. Later that evening, as they drove home, the city lights flickered across the windshield. Maya had fallen asleep in the back seat with her brother cradled in her arms. Elena looked over and smiled. "Do you ever think about how different life might have been?" "Sometimes," Ethan said quietly. But then I remember that every wrong turn led me here, and I wouldn't trade any of it. At home, after carrying the kids to bed, Ethan stepped out onto the porch. The night was still the sound of waves faint in the distance. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who had chased success, who'd forgotten what truly mattered. That man was gone. In his place stood someone humbled by grace, strengthened by love. When Elena joined him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, he smiled and pulled her close. "You know," he murmured, "I once thought losing my memory was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I realize it gave me a second chance." She touched his cheek gently. "And you made the most of it." The porch light glowed around them, soft and golden. Inside, the faint cry of their baby stirred the quiet, followed by Maya's sleepy voice humming to calm him. Ethan looked toward the sound, his heart full. Some stories don't end with fireworks or grand gestures. They end right where they're meant to, in the steady rhythm of love rediscovered. For Ethan Walker, the man who once lost his past redemption didn't come in a courtroom or a headline. It came in the laughter of his daughter, the arms of his wife, and the tiny heartbeat of a son named Logan, the living proof that miracles don't always arrive all at once. Sometimes they come back to you one small piece at a time. When we look back on the story of Ethan Walker and Elena Collins, what began as a chance encounter between a weary lawyer and a desperate little girl turned into a powerful journey of rediscovery, forgiveness, and love. It started with a plea, a child offering a banana to a stranger in exchange for help freeing her wrongly accused mother. But behind that innocent gesture was something far greater: fate quietly weaving together lives torn apart by time and loss. Ethan, a man haunted by missing years and an unshakable sense of emptiness, never imagined that the answer to his restless heart would arrive in the form of a 6-year-old girl named Maya. When he met her mother, Elena, he thought he was simply doing his duty as a lawyer, defending someone innocent, seeking justice in a broken system. What he didn't realize was that justice would lead him to the truth he had been searching for all along. Through every conversation, every shared glance, and every painful revelation, Ethan uncovered not only the mystery of his lost memories, but the fragments of a love story left unfinished. The woman he had once promised to marry, the woman he believed he'd lost forever, had never stopped believing in his goodness even after the world convinced her he was gone. And the daughter he never knew he had carried his name, his heart, and his courage all along. Their reunion was not built on fairy tale perfection, but on resilience, humility, and the willingness to face the past. Both Ethan and Elena had changed, shaped by pain and survival, but beneath the scars, the same love that once brought them together was still alive. They didn't just rebuild a relationship, they rebuilt a family that became stronger, not because life was easy, but because they chose to keep showing up for one another. Years later, as they stood in their home, surrounded by laughter and the warmth of their 2 children, Ethan realized that what he once saw as a tragedy, his accident, his memory loss, his years of emptiness, was actually life's way of giving him a second chance. Sometimes the most painful detours lead us exactly where we were meant to go. The lesson of this story is timeless love and redemption are not found in grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but in everyday choices to forgive, to listen, to hope, and to try again. Life may separate people, time may take away memories, but when something is meant to be, it finds its way back, often in the most unexpected ways. For anyone watching this story tonight, remember, you don't have to have a perfect past to create a beautiful future. What matters most is the courage to face your truth, the heart to forgive those who hurt you, and the faith to believe that no wound is beyond healing. Ethan and Elena's journey reminds us that broken paths can still lead home, and even after years of silence, love can still speak again. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that hope, family, and second chances still matter in this world, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive and inspires us to create even more heartfelt tales that remind us all it's never too late to find your way back to love.